Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on Libertarian Censored subreddit. So first, we have gun control advocates mystified that New Yorkers would turn the Second Amendment from AmmoLand.com by Charbonnet, and yeah, I think that just goes to show you how far removed we are in states like New York from them even viewing the Second Amendment as legitimate at all, especially under the readings of the original text, so, yeah, the thing is, the Constitution's pretty much dead in the water, and it doesn't even matter what the government says or does anymore, what it says or does, and the government will just justify what it justifies anyway. Then we have Pfizer, big drug makers, expected to hike prices on at least 500 drugs in January from nypost.com. And I didn't reply to this one, but it just goes to show you that we shouldn't be giving too much power to the big drug makers like we did when we allowed them to when we mandated their COVID vaccine shots, and you couldn't sue them if there was any side effects. So that's something that's important as well, We should, big business, like big government, is not our friend, and that's important to remember. Then we have Remember from Charbonnet, and that's the meme of Lisa Simpson standing at the board, and she says, they'll spend trillions on bills they haven't read, but want details on how you spend 600. And I would agree with that. The thing is that it's very much a pirate emperor's things. The government can spend infinite money and no one will bat an eye, but you spend $601 on a television and they lose their minds. So, that just goes to show you they have it's just double standards. Then we have Ohio governor who vetoed trans bill protecting minors and girls' sports received over $40,000 from hospitals supporting trans treatments from the federalistpapers.org by Charbonnet. And I said, always follow the money. A lot of politicians, they say, oh, we do this for the good of the people. No, the reason that you always gotta follow the money. That's what they're really in it for. That's why there's so much insider trading in Congress, and they have their friends and family probably insider trade as well, and that's why they're all rich, and they are all the elites. They have all the access to the insider information, and can pass bills to get as much money as possible, and no one will care as long as they have the right letter next to their name. Then we have, claiming you are the government doesn't make you the government. The Constitution sets our rules for how the people consent to be governed. Acting outside of that makes you illegitimate. From Tim Pool on Twitter, and I posted that. And I said, agreed, if the people no longer see the government as legitimate, then it ceases to be so. Libertarians believe in supporting individual rights. If even one person wants to be the government as illegitimate, no one else does. But they should still be able to do so, So it's ultimately, the government only exists really up here in our brains. There's no natural order. It's all sociologically imagined. And if the people suddenly start viewing it as illegitimate, then that's on them, not us. That's my fault on that issue. Then we have Economic Law and Society from Red Eggplant 01. And they say, the state of a nation's currency and its monetary policy is a barometer of how healthy a nation is domestically as well as economically. If the currency is honest, your nation is healthy, since honest money is critical for lasting gains in wealth, and economic progress is required, as we saw in the gold age, where the GDP and workers' wages rose at record levels that never have been repeated since how the U.S. rose to be superpower, 1898, in the center of technological innovation. If the currency is dishonest, debased by inflation, which devalues the currency through the policy of either diluting gold or silver within the coins, like the Romans did, or through dilution through overprinting paper, like nations do today, then your nation becomes unhealthy and weak, as we see with the growing income disparity between those who get the new money first and the fall of the U.S. being the only superpowers, because the rise of Russia and China comes through the U.S. switch to paper currency under FDR. It really comes down to junk money promoting and in fact subsidizing junk culture with most of these social issues we see. Living wage, reparations, gender equality, social justice, soak the rich, etc. merely being disguised attempts at extortion to get back the wealth the government redistributed from the 99% to the 1% for the use of junk currency. This is also permeating the arts and our culture, as we see of today's music and art actively being dissonant and today's art lacking not only elegance and ability, as well as the lack of respect people have for themselves as we see in their appearance. Back during the Gilded Age, when people went out, they wore coats and a tie. Of course, styles change, but how one's dress are also reflect how one respects oneself and other people. So we see this today when all you see are t-shirts and torn jeans and never similar attire. This course of social, cultural, and economic debasement currently ongoing here will only change with the money once again being honest and once again a symbol of moral virtue due to its honesty and purity. Lastly, despite those and less screaming that the cures and morals of society, that when you look at history were created by the previous cures, it comes down to recognizing economic law as the baseline upon which the rest of society is built around, and society has no respect for economic law or its own demise. And that was, I guess I'd agree with that. The thing is that when the economy is illegitimate, everything else I would argue is illegitimate too, and that's what we're seeing in the U.S. right now. An economy where that's essentially illegitimate. The U.S. government can spend $1 trillion in a day, and no one will care, and that's increasingly what we see. No one care. No one views the economy as legitimate anymore, and thus nothing else is legitimate either. And hopefully that will spread to the government as well, as we talked about in the last post from Tim Pool, but that's yet to be seen. But I think there's a good chance it does, because increasingly all forms of legitimacy have been exposed thanks to social media, as the people who say they are in charge of us really aren't better than us, I would say, at all. They're just pretty much the same as us, and yeah, they don't have all the answers, and social media has made that increasingly obvious. Then we have government is inevitable. How do we deal with it? From D.W. Kindig. And that's another bit of a long post. There is no such thing as clean administration. While our presence here is enough proof of that fact, the Supreme Authority individual is a lie perpetrated by those with power. If you're reading this and responding to this, think carefully of the monstrous enormity of the cooperative logistics necessary to have built all of this inside you if you find yourself inescapably immersed. And they have a few more paragraphs as well, but I personally think, that's not true, people need to support individual rights. If you want to support collective rights, that's fine. But these are also they're libertarian socialists. So that's the thing is, I think if people want to do socialism voluntarily, that's okay. But I think socialism, when it's forced on people, is forced collectivism. That's something I've always been against. I'm very into ending forced collectivism. So I think, if you want to see the government as inevitable, like this person does, you should be able to. But no one should force you to see the government as inevitable. Nothing is inevitable, I would say, and that's always a very important mindset to have. Then we have, FYI, the Great Replacement Theory is racist authoritarian bullshit, and that the people who spouted are racist when they deny this, they are also cowards. From Reuters.com, from Hanson Miles, and that's not the actual headlines explain what is the Great Replacement and what are its origins. And I personally think, if you want to believe the Great Replacement theory, I think that's on you. I personally don't really believe it, but I guess I would say it's kind of racist, and yeah, I personally think, you should be, if you want to say it, if you don't believe in it, that's fine. But I personally think my stance is I don't believe in the Great Replacement theory, but I do think you should be able to question why the demographics of the West are changing so rapidly without being shot down as a bigot or racist for it. But that's just my opinion, it's just not something that you're not really allowed to question the mass immigration of today, and that's something that I think you should always be able to question whatever you want to, and that's something that I'm very passionate about. Then we have Japanese Disaster Prevention X account can't post anymore after hitting API limit. The issue has arisen after major tsunami warnings have been issued in the areas of Japan following a strong earthquake. From Dexerdo.com by Frosty Slowman. and I didn't reply to that because they had me blocked. But I think it wasn't an official government account, so Twitter's just going to treat it like any other account. So that's my fault on that issue. Ultimately, I don't think they should even be giving government accounts special privileges, but that's their policy. It's private companies can do whatever they want only until the narrative says otherwise, like it does here. That's my fault on that issue. Then we have all DMCA notices filed against Torrent Freak in 2023 were bogus from torrentfreak.com from Frosty Slowman. And yeah, I'd agree with that. A lot of court stuff is all bogus, I would say, and especially people want to bully you using the courts, and that's not something that I personally like. So that's why I don't really care for legal bullying in addition to all the other forms of bullying. That's what I kind of view as humans. They're very bullyish creatures a lot. They always want to get their way. That's why Bill Larson always is counted as popular, because deep down, everyone has a 6-year-old like him inside them, and that's why I think people are just going to bully you, and they might use legal means to do it, but that doesn't make it any more legitimate, I would say. Then we have Nestle says slavery reporting requirements could cost customers from 2018 from amp.smh.com.au from Clorox. And I personally don't want to, personally I'm very against slavery, but we live in a society that profits off cheap labor, and sadly it's going to be inevitable as long as we live in that society. And I think that, Lincoln's 42 raises a good point here. Anyone want to guess what counts as slavery in the bill? Government always manages to stretch definitions when it comes to stuff like this. So I personally think, I'm against slavery, but sometimes, we need cheap labor or everything's going to get more expensive and harder to transport, as Bertolt Brecht said, I like this quote, First comes full stomachs, then comes ethics, and that's very important. I think we always need to remember how we need to find a way to sustain ourselves first, and then we can start talking about ethics. I would say, and that's something that people are gonna say when we look at issues like this. Then we have House Republicans Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein, flight logs not released because colleagues would be compromised from WashingtonTimes.com, from Kage, blah, blah, blah. And I think, that's probably true. They're all probably on there, I would say. Then we have campaign finance laws are a huge threat to free speech in Canada. It is increasingly difficult to engage in any sort of political activism among politicians without running afoul of ever more rigid definitions of what counts as election campaign advertising from J.J. McConnell on Twitter, and I posted that. And I said, in hindsight, I think Citizens United was the right decision. I don't care for all the political propaganda it allows for, but it's always important to support free speech. I don't like big business just as much as I don't like big government, but I don't want speech to be restricted at all, and that includes speech that comes from them. Then we have a trans woman actor is accusing Delta employees of violating her human rights due to misgendering her. This is incorrect. You do not have a human right to control other people's speech, from Brad Palumbo on Twitter. And I posted that, and I said, agreed, but sadly it looks like society's headed in the other direction currently. And I think that's kind of worrying. Soon I think you might have people being in prison for just saying words, and I don't think that's the right option. And soon, I think, we might just have a full-fledged social credit system built around identity politics, and that's something that really worries me, I would say, because if you're not deemed politically correct, they'll go after you, and that's not something that I think, that the definition of political correctness seems to get more and more authoritarian every year. And I personally think, if you want to be seen as politically incorrect, you should be able to do so, especially in today's culture where any dissent at all is pretty much viewed as politically incorrect. Then we have $1,500 fine for respecting transgender people from International Silver One. That's a crossword from the Facepalm subreddit from a tweet from No Life by Brian Kyler Cohen. A North Dakota Republican has introduced a bill that would fine people and organizations $1,500 if they use a transgender person's desired pronouns. And I personally think that's kind of just virtue signaling, but I definitely don't. I think that's authoritarian, even if it is just government organizations, because we need to support freedom of speech, even if it goes against our narratives, I would say. Then we have student loan borrowers stage a massive student debt strike from creditnews.com by Charbonnet, and I'd agree they should be able to do that. Ultimately, if you take out a loan, I think you should pay it back, but ultimately, people can justify if they justify, and if they want to strike, I think they should be able to. I don't want to control what each individual does. Then we have PBS NewsHour, Child Migrants Put to Work in Unsafe and Illegal Conditions, Season 2024, Think TV from RadioThinkTV.org by Clorox. And I definitely don't think that's good, but, as we talked about earlier, we live in a society that profits off cheap labor, and sometimes child labor might play a role in that. Then we have In Praise of Cheap Labor from Slate.com by Lincolns42. And, yeah, I personally think, in a lot of ways, cheap labor was bad job. It says bad jobs, bad wages, rather than no jobs at all. And I guess I would agree with that. Ultimately, people do need to support support. I'm trying to think of a word here. Themselves in any means necessary. And sometimes they'll have to do that through cheap labor, and that can be hard, but that's sometimes what we have to do. And but by trying to please everyone, by trying to make everyone happy, you're ultimately gonna make no one happy, I think, and that's something I think we'll probably see when it regards to cheap labor. If we want to have the minimum wage, then eventually the actual minimum wage is gonna be zero, and that's something that I think is gonna hurt people in the long run. Then we have Dave Chappelle continues to mock trans people in a new Netflix special from NBCNews.com, and that's by Charbonnet. And I said, Red Eggplant 1 said, "Good for him. Freedom of speech means freedom to defend, and as well as freedom to compliment." And I said exactly, and I linked to the Duckman comedy rant he made back in the 90s. That was a cartoon on the USA Network in the 90s. And he said, humor needs to be offensive, demand to be treated like thinking individuals. And that's increasingly, I'd agree with that. People need to be challenged when it comes to stuff like humor and other methods of thought. And increasingly, the overly politically correct people, or woke in the parlance of our times, want to censor anything they don't agree with. And that's not what a healthy society is built on. A healthy society is built on free speech, not censorship. Then we have Army Commander tells NATO country to prepare for war with Russia from Newsweek.com from Charbonnet, and I don't think that's good. I think the U.S. just keeps continuing to escalate tensions, and I don't think that's very libertarian. Then we have missing black woman in Jordan between the ages of 12 and 25 now. If a special alert is in place, ebony alerts can be activated by CHP in the event a black child or young woman is believed to be kidnapped, missing under suspicious circumstances, or at risk due to developmental disabilities. From SD35 at Senate.ca.gov by Charbonnet. And I personally don't think that. I think that's very, over identity politics. I think we should have one alert for everyone rather than specific alerts for different ethnic groups or genders or whatever. Then we have look like the mods are censoring posts again. I said yesterday I saw a few posts from our friend. This is the self-post I made. Yesterday I saw a few posts from a friend u/Charbonnet mysteriously appear from the new tab despite said post still being visible on their account. I personally think they post a bit too much, but for a subreddit that brands itself as Uncensored, I can't for the life of me understand why people just can't just downvote and move on. And I added, I'm fine with self-censorship, but I will hold the mods accountable anytime I see them violating the uncensored spirit of the subreddit by removing someone else's post without their explicit consent. I'm not just saying this because I politically agree with Charbonnet either. You tried down over 20 with someone who I politically disagreed with, and who I thought also posted too much, but I would make the exact same post if I ever saw any of their posts removed without their consent. I remember seeing one of their posts of theirs that was removed by the admins, but I never saw the mods take it down. I personally think, as Noam Chomsky says, we gotta believe in freedom of expression for even those we despise, not just if we don't believe in that, we don't believe in all. If you brand yourself as uncensored, I think you gotta allow all the posts, not just the ones you like. Then we have more makers, less takers. Why the world needs more Elon Musk and fewer Elizabeth Warrens from John Stossel on YouTube. And I said, sadly, it looks like our society's pushing for more Elizabeth Warrens and fewer Elon Musks. And, yeah, yeah, that's something not something I think is positive. You know, I think we need, you know, as Stoss says, we need more makers, less takers. But sadly, it looks like everyone's pushed to be a taker these days. And I think we're gonna wrap up there. I'll see you guys in this episode. Bye.